John Wick Chapter 4 finally comes out this week in theaters, and as one of my most anticipated films for this year, I could not have been any more excited to see it last week before its release. But with that said, now we have 4 John Wick films to rank from worst to best. I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts on this ranking. Do you agree with me? Do you not? What's your ranking? As well as, are you excited for John Wick Chapter 4? Let me know down there. But with that said, hit that like and subscribe button, and let's dive into this awesome ranking for one of the greatest action franchises of all time. So coming in last place at my number 4, even though this isn't my last place, this ranking is more like my best to bestest list, because at my number 4 is the original John Wick simplified assassination action film starring one man, Keanu Reeves, who is back. And after his car gets stolen and his dog gets shot and killed, which is one of the most depressing things to ever see, this man goes out on a fury. Now, this first John Wick film came out of nowhere. I remember when this film was coming into theaters, I thought the trailer looks cool, but I skipped it in theaters because I was like, I just don't want to waste my time with another shitty action film. God, was I wrong, because when all the good word of mouth was finally coming out, I still didn't get a chance to see this thing in theaters. I wish they would re-release it because I would absolutely go. Its first day out on home release, Blu-ray, I bought it, I took it home, I watched it, and I sat there just going, I messed up. This film is epic. And what I love about the John Wick, the first film at least, is how simplified it is. It really just lets its action tell the story of it all. And Chad, as the director here, really does a great job of how he's supposed to frame everything. Because what they do really smartly is build up this character of John Wick, not through John Wick himself, but through everyone around him and who he interacts with. Whether it's his car guy, and whether it's the Russian mob, who is very scared of him, because just the intro of the Russian guy finding out what his son had done is one of the best things ever. When he goes, he killed John Wick's dog and stole his car, and he goes, oh.
And, killed his dog. Oh.
Like one of the greatest ways to brilliantly introduce a character into this world and exactly who he is without even seeing a single line or frame of action yet. And of course, with the buildup of him being on the phone and telling his son exactly who this is as he's smashing into the ground. Again, a great introduction, and it just starts off from there in a fury of vengeance. This first film, I think a lot of people forget, has a great supporting cast as well. Of course, Ian McShane and rest in peace, Lance Reddick are fantastic as people who work at the hotel. It all adds from there when you get Willem Dafoe and the other actors that come alongside who just know who John Wick is because of their details that they've had with him before. The reason I say this film is so simplified is because it doesn't really dive into any of the assassination world like the sequels do, but what it does do is it just turns in and lets John Wick go on a fury of just killing, vengeance, and providing entertainment for all of us. The reason this one is in last place to just qualify and justify that is because it is a little bit more simplified. I am a major fan of world building when it comes down to that, and the rest of the films definitely bring that world building up a higher stakes. Now, my number 3 is John Wick Chapter 3. Now, this film, probably up to this point back in 2019, had the best action out of the entire franchise. It was just balls to the wall, complete action, no stops at all. And this film is great. It's the film with John being excommunicated and have to really much survive all these assassins as he's trying to figure out how to clear his name, get rid of the bounty, and also just stop the high table at whatever it takes. And looking at this entire film, this is again a film built all around the action, but at the center of it all is the world building that continued from John Wick Chapter 2, elevated to another degree, because now you get to learn more about the high table, you get to learn more about the entire society of assassins and everything of that nature. And this is again a film that, as I continue to just be blown away by every single set piece, it's a film that just never lets up, and I absolutely love, because this film is absolutely gorgeous from a cinematography level. There's so many memorable moments and memorable scenes, and also just, I love how each film, at least after one, really much pits someone who is, again, maybe as strong as John Wick. And seeing his adversary in here was fantastic, because we had Common in number 2, in number 4 you have Donnie Yen, and in this one it's just great to see. Mark Dacascos does a great job at being this like super fan of John Wick, but at the same time being someone who's like, I gotta kill you, I'm sorry, man.
I'm a huge fan, John Wick.
Easily my favorite aspect of John Wick Chapter 3 is the entire sequence with Halle Berry and everything that goes alongside of there. I think Barry's character is absolutely one of the coolest characters ever introduced in the John Wick world, and every time I go back to watch Chapter 3, I just go far as say, why does she not get a spin-off? She is, again, one of the coolest characters in this world, and I love that entire compound with the dogs is easily one of my favorites. To justify why this one's in third place and not a little bit higher is I do think out of all the John Wick films, this film does have the weakest pacing out of them all. Specifically in the back half when he just keeps getting thrown through glass and glass. It feels like it goes on a little bit forever, and I feel like it gets a little bit repetitive in certain ways that John Wick decides to fight people in there, which they completely fixed in the later film. My number 2 is John Wick Chapter 2. Now, this is exactly, at the time, was my favorite John Wick film. The way that it builds off the last one, the ways that it continued and built on the mythology of everything surrounding it, the marker, the high table, once again, the assassination world, and exactly what John Wick must do specifically with these different houses and kind of the political scheming inside this assassination world was brilliant, to say the least. I love how in a way it really much, they take everything and strip away everything from John Wick to really much make him become the guy who he once was. As the Baba Yaga, you see that come through in John Wick Chapter 2. It is a very enthralling, engaging adventure that is from top to bottom just outrageous, but incredibly fun. And it's one of those stories that the more and more I watch it, the more and more I just cheer and get excited for. John Wick Chapter 2 never lets up, and for me, this is one of the perfectly paced films in this entire franchise because it has just enough story and just enough action. Like, the whole catacomb sequence is just brilliant. I love how Common gets intertwined in there, again, as one of the great villains that you could need in here, who's pretty much just as good as John Wick, if anything, especially when they're just, like, shooting at each other in the subway section and no one's really saying anything. But I love how John Wick's back is really much put against the wall. A bounty is put on his head, like usual, and he has to use every means necessary to kill him. And you get to see what John Wick does with a pencil. John Wick Chapter 2 is just a blast, and I absolutely love it. But I do want to talk about my number 1, which I'm sure, as you've guessed, is John Wick Chapter 4. John Wick Chapter 4 takes up the ante and actually made me go, yep, I'm done. I don't need a single other John Wick film. You can still do spin-offs. Feel free to spin off Donnie Yen's character and do like a prequel film of his entire past. Do Halle Berry. I know they're doing the ballerina spin-off with Ana de Armas. That hopefully will be good. But John Wick as the main character, I'm done. I don't need to see any more. John Wick Chapter 4 is a perfect swan song to the entire story. Sure, did they leave up open certain doors and certain avenues? I guess they did. But watching this movie, it was every single thing that I wanted it to be and more. It's a near 3-hour action epic that increasingly is all killer, no filler, but when it needs story, it needs it. And the fact that it's 2 hours and 49 minutes and it did not feel any bit of that, I was completely shocked. Because this film does not feel like 3 hours. It genuinely feels like maybe 2 hours at most, and that's a giant compliment. It's the best paced film out of the entire John Wick franchise. It feels like the shortest one out of them all. It doesn't have a single dull moment. The second it kicks off in such a grand way that comes off the ending of the third one with the Bowery King and John Wick, and the way that it kind of just kicks off from there and gives us action scenes. And every single action scene from that very first scene gets better and better than the last. You have the first one, which is like, okay, this is good. Like, this is more John Wick nature, and it's awesome seeing all these swords, and they're in Tokyo, and they're kicking ass, and you get introduced to all these new awesome characters, which I could not explain enough how much I loved every single one of the characters in here. Every single person was a standout, specifically Donnie Yen as Kane. I loved this guy. I loved his character so much. Even the villain in here, I think, might be the strongest out of all the John Wick films. Bill Skarsgård is very intimidating in kind of a bit. Even Shamir Anderson, who plays a new character called the Tracker, he's very interesting too because he's coming and tracking John Wick to try and kill him. Speaking of, out of all the new characters, they bring in another new villain called Killa, played by Scott Adkins, who, if you know him, he's very much a martial artist master. Amazing! Hiroki Sanada and Rina Swama are phenomenal as father and daughter in here. I need more of them. I would love, again, a spinoff of all of them. Spinoffs, there's so much that they build in here, but it always still goes back and focuses on our main person, John Wick himself. And as a beautiful swan song. Like, Keanu Reeves could end his career here and be like, you know, I'm just done. I don't want to do any more movies. I could understand that, because this just looked like it took everything from him and Chad Stahelski as a director, and specifically what they were able to build. Again, building on the whole world, but everything that we'd already learned, they go above and beyond it. But specifically, Keanu Reeves gives his best performance, and what I was most blown away by was the entire singularly, again, action set piece after action set piece, and all the stuff in the middle becoming more intriguing and more intriguing. But the last action set piece, the last 45 minutes of this film, is some of the best 45 minutes that I've ever seen during a film, and I was completely blown away by it. You are going to have your jaw on the floor after you see this. They go from an epic car chase to an incredible one-shot take with a dragon breath shotgun, and then the staircase fight scene, to one of the best and most subtle moments that they've ever done in an action film. Like, the final 10 minutes of this, I was like in love with it, because I'm like, this is so different but so perfect. And John Wick Chapter 4 is the best John Wick film. This is one of the greatest action franchises of all time. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Thank you so much again for watching this, and of course, until next time, stay classy.